I was lying on my bed during the peak of summer, fan blowing hot air directly onto my face, sweat pooling on my chest. My air conditioner had broken down, and the repairman quoted me $300 just to look at it. I didn't have that kind of money, so I started looking for alternative cooling methods, and I stumbled upon a technique used in the Middle East and the American Southwest for centuries, the desert cooler, also known as a swamp cooler. The principle is incredibly simple. Evaporation cools the air. When water evaporates, it absorbs heat from its surroundings. If you pass hot, dry air through a wet pad, the air cools down before it enters your room. In arid climates, this can drop the temperature by up to 30 degrees Fahrenheit. I was skeptical. Could a box of wet straw and a fan really cool down my entire room? I had watched a few videos, read some forum posts, and everyone swore by it. So I decided to build one myself. The materials cost me about $40. A portable air conditioner would cost me at least $150. That meant I could save over $100 if this actually worked. But I had no idea about humidity, airflow, or how to properly size a cooling pad. I built it, I tested it, and I learned that this ancient desert trick is not just a hack, it's a physics lesson. This is not a sponsored video. I bought every material with my own money, and honestly, I wish I had known about this years ago. Let me give you some context about why evaporative cooling is so effective in dry climates. The principle is based on the latent heat of vaporization. When water changes from liquid to gas, it absorbs a significant amount of heat energy from its surroundings. That's why sweating cools your skin. The sweat evaporates and takes heat away. In a swamp cooler, a pump circulates water over a large, porous pad made of aspen or cellulose. A fan draws hot, dry air through the pad, and the water evaporates into the air, dropping the temperature of the air before it blows into the room. The colder the air, the more moisture it can hold, but the key is that the evaporation process itself cools the air. In a desert climate with low humidity, this works beautifully. In a humid climate, it's almost useless. The efficiency drops dramatically when the relative humidity exceeds 60%. I live in a relatively dry area, not a desert, but dry enough that summer humidity often stays below 30%, so I had a perfect testing ground. I bought a large wooden frame, a small water pump, a fan, and a thick evaporative cooling pad. The total cost was about $42. I assembled it in my garage, connected the pump to a bucket of water, and turned on the fan. The first thing I noticed was the sound, a gentle hum of water trickling over the pad, and the fan pushing air through. The air coming out of the cooler felt noticeably cooler than the surrounding air. I measured the temperature at the intake and the output. The intake was 95 degrees. The output was 72 degrees. That's a 23-degree drop, using nothing but water and a fan. I was amazed. I moved the cooler into my bedroom, placed it near a window, and let it run for an hour. The temperature in my room dropped from 92 to 79 degrees. It wasn't ice cold, but it was comfortably cool. I sat down and actually felt relaxed for the first time in days. I ran it for an entire day, and my electricity bill barely moved. The fan and pump together consumed about 50 watts. A portable air conditioner would use over 1,000 watts. That meant I was saving not only money on the purchase, but also on the electricity bill. The desert cooler was a clear winner. But then I tested its limits. I increased the airflow, added a larger fan, and even used a thicker pad. The temperature drop improved by a few degrees, but not dramatically. I also tried using ice water instead of regular tap water. The output temperature dropped by about 5 more degrees, but the ice melted quickly, and it wasn't practical for long-term use. I also learned that the cooler requires constant airflow. If you block the window, the cooler just recirculates humid air and stops working. You need to have an open window or a vent to let the hot, dry air escape. I also found that the water needs to be changed every few days, otherwise algae and bacteria can build up in the bucket. I cleaned the pad regularly, and the cooler worked reliably for weeks. I decided to compare my homemade swamp cooler to a commercial portable air conditioner that a friend had. His AC cost him $250. It cooled the room to 68 degrees in about 15 minutes. But it consumed 1,500 watts and made a loud compressor noise. My swamp cooler took about 2 hours to bring the room down to 79 degrees, but it used only 50 watts and was nearly silent. It wasn't as powerful, but it was far cheaper to run. Over the course of a month, his AC added about $40 to his electricity bill. My cooler added less than $5. That was a huge difference. Now, let me give you the final numbers. A portable air conditioner costs about $250. My swamp cooler costs $42. That is a saving of over $200 up front. But the operating cost is where it really shines. The swamp cooler uses about a tenth of the electricity of an AC. Over the course of a summer, I would save about $110 on electricity alone, so the total savings are much higher. But I have to be honest about the limitations. The swamp cooler only works in dry climates. If the humidity rises above 60%, the cooling drops to almost nothing. It also adds moisture to the air, which is a benefit in dry climates, but a problem if you already have high humidity. It cannot cool a room as quickly or as deeply as an air conditioner, and it requires regular maintenance. You have to clean the pad, change the water, and monitor the humidity. But for someone who lives in an arid region and wants to save money, it is a genuinely viable alternative. I tested it on the hottest day of the year, 110 degrees, and my room stayed at 86. That was 24 degrees cooler than outside. The humidity stayed around 30%. I felt comfortable. I slept well. I saved money. And I learned that sometimes the oldest technology is the most efficient. Does this desert trick actually work? Yes, it works remarkably well in dry climates. Is it as good as an air conditioner? No, it's not as powerful, not as fast, and not as cold. But for the price, it's outstanding. Should you build one? If you live in a dry area, absolutely. If you live in a humid area, don't bother. The best thing I learned from this experiment is that nature has already solved many of our problems. We just forgot the solutions because we got used to electricity and compressors. The desert cooler is a perfect example. It's cheap, simple, and effective, and it costs almost nothing to run. That is a lesson worth remembering. If you enjoyed this experiment and you want to see more real tests like this, you need to commit to this channel right now. Subscribe to Overlooked and hit that notification bell because I test the hacks that nobody else dares to try, and I show you the truth, whether it works or fails. Trust me, you will not want to miss the next experiment. If you have ever built a swamp cooler, or if you have any other cooling hacks, let me know in the comments. I genuinely want to hear your experiences, good or bad. Thanks for watching. And remember, sometimes the best cooling system is the one you build with a bucket, a fan, and a little bit of water. You just have to be willing to try. See you in the next one.